of this workshop. So we have with us Dr. Venkateshwar Rao Kagita. So sir is an assistant professor at NIT Warangal. He has obtained PhD from University of Hyderabad. His research interests are data mining, machine learning, and deep learning with a specific focus on machine learning techniques for recommender systems. His research works have been published in various reputed journals and conference proceedings such as pattern recognition letters, information sciences, expert systems with applications, Journal of Approximate Reasoning like AAI, PRI, CAI, etc. He has also delivered various guest lectures and in various international and national workshops at IITs, NITs, and other state universities. I warmly welcome you, sir. And sir is giving us a talk on polynomial regression systems. So I request sir to please take over.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Give me 1 minute. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, okay, sir.
Yeah, very good afternoon, one and all. I hope I'm clearly audible.
From this side, you are audible.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah, I hope my screen is visible to you all.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am, for inviting me and providing this opportunity to share the knowledge. Thank you very much, and very good afternoon, one and all. I'm gonna speak about the regression analysis, particularly linear regression and polynomial regression. I'm gonna discuss. One request to you all is that, one request to you all.
Yeah. Because please mute mic. Everybody is requested to mute.
Please mute yourselves, and if you have any queries, please feel free to ask me. You can unmute at any point of time and ask me queries. And one request to you all is that please make the session more interactive. So by asking more queries and by interacting, and I mean whenever I ask some questions, please do reply for that. That makes the session more interesting and interactive. Right. So with this, let me start this topic, regression analysis. The agenda is this. The agenda is to cover what is a regression problem and the different solutions for this linear regression problem, like linear regression. And we'll also see the optimization, different optimization techniques, vectorized solution for the same thing. We'll also see the closed form solution and some practical advices. Probabilistic interpretation, if you are interested, I'll discuss. Otherwise, we can skip that also. And then we'll discuss the polynomial regression. So that's the agenda for this particular session. So all of you are aware of the different types of learning and specifically supervised learning. Am I right? So can I assume that you are aware of the supervised learning? supervised learning?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I hope that participants do the same.
All right. So right. So the regression problem is a special kind of supervised learning. There is a particular problem in the supervised learning. So this is the problem. We have given a training set of pairs x1, y1, x2, y2, so on, xm, ym, where xi is a future vector and yi is a continuous target variable. And the task is to produce new instance. So I'll tell you in very simple words. We have given information about the m different instances. What is the input and what is the output? And given a m plus 1th instance, we don't know what is the output. We only know what is the input. So the task is to predict what is the output. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I've given information about the m houses. So these are the input parameters of the house, input variables of the house, size of the house. Output parameter, output variable of the house is the price of the house, right? So the size and the corresponding price, size then the corresponding price. Like this, I've given information about the m different houses. So let's say that I've given the size is 100. If the size is 100, price is 300. If the size is 200, then the price is 500. And size is 300, then the price is 700. If the size is 400, the price is 900, and so forth. So this information about the different houses is given to us. Given a new house for which let's say that the size is 500. Now the question is, what would be the price of the house? Can you analyze and say what would be the price of the house in this case? Can you analyze the 4 instances given to us and say that what would be the price of the house? Can anyone tell me this? What would be the price of the house? Given these instances, what would be the price of the house? Given instances, 4 instances, size is 100, then the price is 300, size is 200, then the price is 500, size is 300, then the price is 700, and size is 400, then the price is 900. So now I'm giving a new instance for which I don't know what is the price of the house. I just know what is the size of the house. What would be the price of the house? What would be the price of the house? Increasing in the odd fashion, but what you can guess?
1100.
1100, isn't it? So 1100 we've got. So how did we arrive at this 1100? Because we found some relation between the price of the house and the size of the house by analyzing these 4 instances. Am I right? So the relation that we found is that price is equivalent to 2 times size of the house plus 100. So this is what the relation that I have found between the output variable price and the input variable size. So now once I found the relation by analyzing these 4 instances, I'm substituting this 5th instance size in this and I'm getting what would be the price of the house. This means 2 times 500 plus 100, which is equivalent to 1100. So that's how I got 1100. I mean, that's how you got 1100, isn't it?
Yes,
So
sir.
in the supervised learning, it is trying to find the relationship between the output variable and the input variable. And it is using that relation to predict for the future instances. So the problem is very simple. We have given information about the m instances and given m plus 1th instance, we only know what is the input variables. We don't know what is the output variable, right? So what would be the output variable? So that's what the problem is. Here we are calling it as a regression problem because the output that we are in continuous value. It's not a discrete value. If it is a discrete value like yes or no, or what type of cancer it is, or to which folder an email should belong to, or what kind of object it is. So these are all the discrete problems in which an object belongs to a particular class. But here it is a continuous value. It can take any value. So minus infinity to infinity, right? So therefore the problem is a regression problem. The output variable that we are interested to predict, if it is a continuous, if it is a discrete value, then we call the problem as a classification problem. Both comes under the supervised learning. So in this particular section, we are interested in a regression problem and different solutions of the regression problem. So let's start with an example. So how do we predict the housing prices? We collect the data regarding housing prices and how they related to size in square feet. So this is the data given to us. Given this data, we should be able to find the relation between the size of the house and the price of the house, or in general, between the input variables and the output variable, right? So we try to fit some model to this data and we use that model to predict for the future instances, right? So now, suppose my model is a straight line. My model is a straight line. It means I'm trying to fit a straight line to this data. Right. So given this data and given this model that I fit to this data, right, a friend has a house of 750 square feet. How much can they be expected to get? So this is the data given to me and I fit a straight line to this model. I'm trying to represent this data using a straight line, right? So now with this model, how much how much my friend can expect to get? For a 750 square feet house. So how much it would be? According to this model, it would be around $150,000, isn't it? So this is somewhere $750, 750 square feet. So according to this model and according to this data and this model, this would be around $150,000. Suppose if I fit a second order polynomial, it means I'm representing the data using a second order polynomial, right? It means, so how much can they be expected to get according to this model? Yes, Satish sir, do you have any query?
నేను తప్పుడు సార్ లేదు సార్ నేను బాగానే ఇచ్చారు సార్ ఇప్పుడు ఏంటంటే మదర్ పేరు మీద ఉంది కదా మదర్ లేదు కదా హైర్ ఇచ్చింది కదా
This would be around $200,000. Ma'am, can you mute him?
Yeah,
You can
Satish,
mute all.
sir,
You can
Satish,
mute
sir,
if you are
please
the
mute
host.
yourself. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So this would be around $200,000. So what kind of model that we have to fit to this data, or how do we represent this data using some model, right? So we'll see all that in the future, in the coming slides. So we'll start with the linear regression model, where the assumption is that the output is a linear combination of the input variables. It means there exists a linear relationship between the output variable and the input variables. So that's what the linear regression assumes. So before going to discuss about the linear regression model, let me explain you a general machine learning recipe, and then we'll proceed to how the linear regression fits into this framework, right? So in any general machine learning problem, machine learning algorithm, the procedure is this. We are given a training set like this we have seen here, right? So this is the training set given to us. So given this training set, we are giving this training set to a learning algorithm, machine learning algorithm. And this learning algorithm is giving us the hypothesis. We also call it as a model. We also call it as a sum function, which represents the relation between the output and the input variables, right? So given a training set, we are giving it to the learning algorithm, and learning algorithm giving us the hypothesis or a model. So once we get this model, we give the new instance to this model and it estimates the corresponding target variable. For example, in our example, house price prediction example, once I get the hypothesis, I'm giving the size of the house as an input for this hypothesis, and it is giving me the estimated price, right? So that's how we represent. This is a general machine learning recipe, and this is how it works. Given a training set, we give it to the learning algorithm. Learning algorithm gives us the hypothesis, and we use this hypothesis to estimate for the future instances. Now the question is, what is this hypothesis? How do we represent the hypothesis in linear regression model? So as I have mentioned previously, linear regression assumes that there exists a linear relationship between the output variable and the input variables. It means the output is a linear combination of the input variables. Or in simple words, it trying to fit a line or a hyperplane to the data. So the linear regression tries to fit a line or a hyperplane to the data. So line in case of two-dimensional data, hyperplane in case of multi-dimensional data. So What is the equation of the line? Can anyone tell me what is the equation of the line? Equation of the line. It is y equal to mx plus b. Yeah, a plus bx, right? Manisha said. So y equal to mx plus b. This is of that type, right? So the line equation is this. So if you see the hypothesis here, isn't it the same? Where theta naught equal to b and theta 1 equal to m, isn't it? So I'm representing the hypothesis as a line, which is equivalent to theta naught plus theta 1 x. So here, theta naught and theta 1 are the parameters of a line. Theta naught and theta 1 are the parameters of a line. So linear regression with one input variable, we call it as a univariate linear regression. And in linear regression, the multiple variables, we call it as a multivariate linear regression. So just we'll first discuss about the univariate linear regression, then we'll move to the multivariate linear regression, right? So now, say till here, we have seen what is the regression problem and how the linear regression represents the hypothesis for a data. So it represents the hypothesis as a line in the case of univariate linear regression. Right. Now, the question is, there are many lines that are going through this data. So the linear regression trying to fit a line to the data. But now, if you see that figure, there are many lines that are going through the data. This line is 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 going. This line is going. This line is going. There are infinite number of lines that goes through this data. The many lines that are possible that are going through this data, right? So which line is the best? How do you say a particular line is best and fitting well to this data? How can we say? I'll give you two options. Ignore about the infinite number of options that are possible. Ignore about all that. I'll give you two options. Tell me which is better among these two options, right? So let's say that this is the data set. I'm just replicating the data set in that figure. Let's say it is something like this. This is the data set given to you, and this is line 1, L1, and this is line 2, L2. So which line is better according to you?
So L1.
L1 is better. So how did we say that L1 is better?
Because it has most data points on it.
It is going through the most of the data points. It means it is estimating most of the data points correctly, close to the actual values. Am I right? So
Yes,
this
sir.
line is estimating most of the data points close to the actual values. So that is why we are saying this line 1 is better than line 2. Whereas if you see line 2, it is estimating very few of the points close to the actual values. The other points, it is estimating the prediction and actual values are deviating too much according to line 2, right? So that's the reason why we said the line 1 is better than line 2 in this case. So now, can I say that a line that minimizes the difference between actual and the estimated prices is the best line out of all these possibilities that are available to me, isn't it? Can I say that? A line that minimizes the difference between actual and the estimated prices is the best line. I can definitely say it, right? So out of all these possibilities, I'm trying to pick a line. My objective is to pick a line that minimizes the difference between actual and the estimated prices. But what makes the line different? What makes one line different from the other line? So let's say that two different lines, let me take 2x plus 3 and 3x plus 4. So what is making this line different from this line? The two parameters, theta naught and theta 1. These two are the parameters that making one line different from the other line. Am I right? Am I right? So these two are the parameters that making one line different from the other line, right? So what is my objective now? My objective is to learn these two parameters. My objective is to learn the best parameters such that the difference between actual and the estimated prices is minimized. So the objective is to choose these parameters, theta naught and theta 1, such that the predicted value h theta of x is close to y, which is the actual value for all the training examples. That means we want to minimize the difference between actual and the estimated prices for each and every example. So that's what my objective is, isn't it? So my objective is to learn a line that minimizes the difference between actual and estimated prices. And it is boiling down to a problem of estimating the two parameters theta naught and theta 1 such that the difference between actual and estimated prices is minimized. Right? So let me formalize my objective that is at hand. So this is what is my loss, and my objective is to minimize the loss. So this is the estimated price or the predicted price, and this is the actual price. I'm just taking the square loss so that the more deviating points are penalized more, right? So I'm taking this for all the instances in the training set for I equal to 1 to m and divided by n, 1 by m. This 2 is to simplify the mathematics in the future. So my objective is to minimize this j of theta, which means this loss, the squared difference between actual and estimated prices. Objective is to minimize the squared difference between actual and the estimated prices, or squared difference between predicted and actual prices, estimated and actual values, right? So the objective is to minimize them. So objective is to learn this theta naught and theta 1 that minimizes this j of theta, which is the square loss. The objective is to learn theta naught and theta 1 that minimizes the square loss, which is this. Is the objective clear? Is the objective clear? Is the objective clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Now, how do I learn this theta naught and theta 1? How do I learn the optimal theta naught and theta 1? Is it okay if I do this? I'll be doing some mantra now. I'll be chanting some mantra now. Om Beam Bush. And I'll be selecting this theta naught and theta 1. And I would say that this is the best optimal theta naught and theta 1 that I've got. Is that okay if I say that? You will not agree with me, right? Isn't it? You will not agree with this, right? So it will not be optimal way of selecting the parameters, isn't it? So how do we select these optimal parameters, theta naught and theta 1? That minimizes the difference between actual and estimated prices. So we have to initialize them to some values and gradually search towards the optimal values. That is where exactly this gradient descent algorithm helps us. Gradient descent algorithm is an optimization technique that is helping us to learn these optimal parameters, theta naught and theta 1. Now, the question is, what is gradient? First of all, forget about gradient descent. What is gradient? First of all, we all know what is gradient, right? So let us recall what is gradient. Then we will go to this gradient descent algorithm. So I'm taking a very simple function to explain you the concept of gradient, which is a line function, y equal to mx plus b. So if you see this y equal to mx plus b, m indicates the gradient or a slope of this function, and y indicates how far it is up, and x indicates how far it is long, and b is the value of y when x equivalent to 0. So now if I want to get the slope of this function mx plus b, it means I want to know what is the slope of this function as I vary x. As I am varying x, as I am increasing x, or as I am varying x, what is the slope of this? Is it a positive slope, or is it a negative slope, or is it a neutral slope? That's what I'm interested to find. So how do I get this? How do you get the slope of this function with respect to x? I want to know the slope of this mx plus b as I vary x. When I am varying x, what is the slope? Is it increasing, or is it decreasing, or is it neutral? Is it positive? Is it a negative? Is it neutral? 0, right? So that's what I wanted to know. So is it okay if I do this? To get the slope of this function mx plus b, I take the derivative of this function mx plus b with respect to x, because I want to know what is the slope of this as I vary x, right? So what would I get if I take the derivative of this function with respect to x? What would I get? What would I get? So your replies are required. Your interaction is required. Please do respond. So don't think that a silly questions I'm asking. So that makes this session interactive and interesting. So what is the derivative of the function with respect to x? Mx plus b with respect to, that is m, isn't it? So what is m? M is nothing but the slope, isn't it? So m is the slope. So if I want to get the slope or the gradient of a particular function with respect to some variable, what do? I take the derivative of this function with respect to that variable, then I get the slope. Suppose if I have multiple variables, let's say instead of x, I have two variables, x1 and x2. What do? I take the derivative of this y with respect to x1, and I take the derivative of this y with respect to x2, then the vector of all such partial derivatives gives me the gradient. Right? So this is how I get the gradient. Right? So this is partial derivative of vector of all the partial derivatives giving me the gradient. And if the line is ascent, then we call it as a positive gradient. If it is increasingly monotonically increasing function, then it is a positive gradient. If it is descent, then it is a negative gradient. If it is horizontal, then it is a zero gradient or neutral gradient. Right. So now coming back to our problem, our objective is to minimize this. Our objective is to learn this theta naught and theta 1 that minimizes j of theta. That minimizes j of theta. So let's say that the objective function that you are trying to minimize is something like this. When you plot it against one of the parameters theta 1, I'm just taking a single parameter here just for the sake of simplicity. So this is the objective function this is how it is looking like when I plot theta versus j of theta. So this is how it is looking like. And what is our objective? Our objective is to minimize this j of theta. Our objective is to minimize this j of theta. It means I want to reach here, this point where j of theta is minimum. So where is it minimum? For this concerned theta 1, it is minimum. It means I want to learn this theta 1 where the j of theta is minimum. So my objective is to learn this theta 1. Right? But when I randomly initialize by chanting mantra, right? This may not be here. Am I right? So this may be somewhere here, this may be somewhere here, this may be somewhere here, here. It can be anywhere because you are initializing it randomly. Am I right? So the theta 1, the initial theta 1 that you have chosen randomly, it can be anywhere, not necessarily the optimal value. Right? So when you initialize this theta 1, let's say that it is somewhere here. When you initialize this theta 1, let's say that it is somewhere here. So what is the slope of the function here? Is it a negative slope or is it a positive slope? Or is it a neutral slope, zero slope? What is the slope of the function here at this point of time, at this point of theta 1? So what is this theta 1? Is it a negative slope or is it a positive slope or is it a neutral slope? Can you tell me? What is it? Is it a negative slope or is it a positive slope? Is it descending or is it ascending? Sorry?
Descending.
So what is it? It is a negative slope or a positive slope?
It's negative.
It's a negative slope, isn't it? The slope is negative here and the optimal theta 1 is here. I'm currently here. I'm currently here and the optimal theta 1 is here. Theta 1 star is here. So do I have to increment theta 1 or decrement theta 1 to reach to the optimal point? Do you have to increment or do you have to decrement? Theta 1 to reach to the optimal point.
You have to increment it.
I have to increment theta 1 to reach to the optimal point, isn't it? So let me take a different scenario where the slope is positive. So let's say when I randomly initialize this theta 1, it is somewhere here. Okay, so what is the slope here? Is it positive or is it negative? Slope. Is it a positive slope or is it a negative slope at this point of theta 1?
It's positive, I think so.
It's a positive slope, right? It's a positive slope. Positive slope, right? So optimal point is here. So now do I have to increment theta 1 or decrement theta 1 to reach the optimal point?
So you have to decrement it.
You have to decrement theta 1 to reach to the optimal point. Am I right? So from this, I can say that if the slope is negative, we have to increment theta 1 to reach to the minimum value of z of theta. And if the slope is positive, we have to decrement theta 1 to reach to the minimum value of z of theta. Can I say that? If the slope is negative, we have to increment theta 1 to reach to the positive the optimal value of z of theta, minimum value of z of theta. If the slope is positive, we have to decrement theta 1 to reach to the minimum value of z of theta. Am I right? Saurav, Swati madam, am I right? Can I say that? Can definitely say that, right? So similarly, this is one dimensional with respect to one parameter. if you are optimizing it with respect to multiple parameters, let's say theta naught and theta 1, you can imagine it like a ball, like this, as you can see in the figure. And our objective is to reach to this bottom of this ball. Optimal point is here. So you have to adjust this theta naught and theta 1 such that you reach here. So let's say when you randomly initialize it, we somewhere here. So you adjust them, theta naught and theta 1, by computing the gradient such that finally it will converge to this point, right? So now how do we adjust this according to the slope? Is it okay if I do this? Is this okay if I do this? I'm initializing this theta naught and theta 1. I repeat this until convergence. What am I repeating? I'm updating this theta values. Theta equal to theta minus alpha times derivative of j with respect to theta. So theta j equal to theta j minus alpha times derivative of j with respect to theta j. And now if you observe, what is this derivative of j with respect to theta? What it is giving us? What it is giving? Just now we have seen that. What is it giving? Derivative of j with respect to theta j.
Slope.
It is giving the slope. Okay. And what we said, if the slope is negative, we have to increment theta j if the slope is negative. If the slope is positive, then we have to decrement theta j. So if this is negative, so negative of negative is positive. It means what? You are doing increment of this theta j. Am I right? If this is positive, then negative of positive, it's a negative. So therefore you are decrementing theta j. Am I right? And this
Yes.
alpha determines the step size. With what step you would increment or decrement? Right? Do you take a longer steps or you take a smaller steps when you are moving from left to right or right to left? Right? So this alpha determines that step size. So this we call it as a gradient descent algorithm. What it is doing? When the gradient is negative, it is incrementing theta j. When the gradient is positive, it is decrementing theta j. And this is what you get when you take the derivative of j with respect to theta naught. And this is what you get when you take the derivative of theta j with respect to theta 1. So earlier we had a little doubt that why did we take 2 in the denominator? This is to simplify that mathematics. And when you take the derivative, this 2 will come this side, isn't it? So to get it cancelled, we have taken this 2 in the denominator, and it will not be affecting our objective because minimizing x is equivalent to minimizing x by 2. So it will not affect our objective. At the same time, it is simplifying some mathematics. So that's the reason why we have taken 2 in the denominator. I hope that's clear.
Yes.
Then, yeah. So the gradient descent is an optimization algorithm which is used to find the values of the parameters of a function that minimizes the cost function. So in this particular case, we are trying to learn the optimal parameters theta naught and theta 1. And this can be best used when the parameters cannot be determined using the linear algebraic equations analytically. Right. So this also we'll see, which we call it as a closed form solution. So if you cannot determine the parameters using the closed form solution, then the gradient descent or any optimization technique is a better way of learning them. Right. So that is about the univariate linear regression, wherein we have only one input variable and one output variable. Right. So, but then in reality, we can have more than one input variables or features that represent an object. So in this particular example, let's say that we have a house. The many number of features can be used to represent a house, and all of these features are important to determine the price of the house. For example, size of the house is one feature, number of bedrooms of the house, that is also influencing the price, isn't it? The number of bedrooms in the house also influencing, number of floors of the house also influencing the price, age of the home also influencing the price. So we have expressed this house in terms of a different features rather than expressing it with a single feature, right? So there are 4 features that we have taken here. More than one input variable we have, 4 input variable we have. So if I have a multiple input variables, then we call the problem as a multivariate linear regression. So we use all these input variables to make a prediction for the output variable. So these are some of the notations that I'm going to use in the coming slides. And is the number of features. How many number of features here I have? How many number of features? How many attributes? 4, right? Size,
Yes.
number of bedrooms, number of rooms, and age of the home. These are the 4. And how many output variable? 1, price. Right. M represents the number of examples. Here I have 4 examples. 1, 2, 3, 4. And X superscript I is a vector of input variable for an example. For example, X superscript 3 is a description about the third house, which is this. And X superscript 3 subscript 2, it means a particular feature in the third house. It means this is the number of bedrooms in the third house. X superscript 3 subscript 2. So these are the some of the notations that I've got in the coming slides. So previously, our hypothesis is a line, which is theta naught plus theta 1 x when I have only one input variable x. Now I have got multiple input variables. I've got x1, I've got x2, I've got x3, and I've got x4. So now how do I represent this hypothesis? I represent the hypothesis as theta naught plus theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2 plus so on theta 4 x4. So to generalize this, I can write it as theta n xn. So on theta n xn. So to generalize this equation, I'm taking x naught equal to 0 and rewriting the whole equation as this. So when I multiply x naught equal to 1, this will be equivalent to theta naught. I'm just generalizing it. Theta naught x naught plus theta 1 x1 plus so on theta 4 x4. So in a vectorized notation, I can write it as a theta transpose x, where theta is equal to a column vector of all these all these parameters, theta naught to theta 4, and x is equivalent to vectors x1, x0 equal to 1, x1, so on, x4. So when I multiply theta transpose x, what do I get? I get this, isn't it? Theta transpose x, when I multiply, what will I get? Theta naught x naught, theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2, so on, theta 4 x4. Right? So this is the vectorized notation to express the hypothesis. Now the question is, why do we have to go for the vectorized representation? Because if we represent them or if we implement them in a vectorized form, it takes the implementation, it takes the advantage of the parallel architecture exist in your computer, right, and execute the different operations parallelly. So that is the reason why we go for the vectorized implementation. And the cost function is same. We want to minimize the square difference between actual and the estimated prices. The only thing that is changing is this hypothesis. Earlier it was just theta naught plus theta 1x. Now it is theta naught plus theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2, so on theta 4 x4, or in general theta n xn. And the gradient descent algorithm is also same. Gradient descent algorithm is also same. Theta j equivalent to theta j minus alpha times derivative of j with respect to theta j. Right, but this may change slightly because the hypothesis is changing, but the procedure is same. Right, the only thing that is changing is that hypothesis representation. Earlier it is just theta naught plus theta 1x. It means earlier it is a line, now it is a hyperplane. Earlier it is a line, now it is a hyperplane. So that's the difference. And this is what I get when I take the derivative of j of theta with respect to x with respect to theta j. Right. So far any query I can take. Is that clear? Are you with me so far? Yeah. Fine. So when you are implementing this gradient descent algorithm practically, there are certain things that we need to take care of. There are certain things that we need to take care of. So we'll see those practical implementations. Padmaja ma'am, any query? Padmaja ma'am. Padmaja ma'am.
But sir, I think that it the volume on automatically, I think so, madams.
No problem, no problem.
Are you explaining this slide, sir, now?
Yeah, I'm explaining it, sir. Yeah, but in between I'm getting some noise. That's why I was asking that any query.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Some noise is coming from this audience part.
You have the option to mute everyone, madam.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling to technician right now, sir. Please give me 1 minute, sir.
All right. So there are certain things that we have to take care when we are implementing this practically, gradient descent algorithm practically. One of the thing is the feature scaling. What is feature scaling? Feature scaling is bringing the different features into the similar scale. Bringing different features into the similar scale, right? So in the range of 0 to 1, or in the range of -1 to 1, or in the range of -0.5 to 0.5, like that, we want to bring them into the similar scale. Why do we have to bring them into the similar scale? What happens if they are not in the similar scale? Like for example, if there are range differences. Otherwise, madam, you can make me co-host. I can do it. If you have a problem in doing. All right. So do you have idea about the contour graphs? How can I explain that? So take this. So what do you see if you see it from the top angle? So this figure, what do you see if you see it from the top angle? What do you see? You will see the sequence of circles kind of, right? So the bottom point is this, then you will have a circle, 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 isn't it? So this kind of thing that you see when you see it from the top view. Am I right? Am I right? Saurav, Swati ma'am, you were there. Am I right? So what
Yes,
is
sir.
Yeah.
This concentric circles might be.
Concentric circles will get, isn't it? And this is the point where it is minimum. Am I right? So the middle one, isn't it? And anywhere within one circle, the J value is same, right? Because it is at the same level, right? It is at the same level. Anywhere on the circle, the J value is same. And our goal is to reach, what happened? Our goal is to reach to this point. Am I right? So this middle point, right? So what happens to this contour graph when you have a huge range difference between the features? When you have a huge range difference between the features, the corresponding parameters will also have a huge range difference. As a result, the contour graph will look like tall and thin, as you can see in this figure. It's not like a concentric circles, it's like a concentric like ovals. Okay, so maybe wondering, yeah, okay, it's okay. Earlier it is circle, now it is oval. What is so great? If it is like this, if the shape is tall and thin, what happens when you are adjusting the parameters? So when you are adjusting the parameters, you are updating them like this. Theta 1 equivalent to theta 1 minus something. Theta 2 equivalent to theta 2 minus something. Okay, so in this something, we also have theta 2. Or in this something, we also have theta 1. Isn't it? So now, if there is a huge range difference, what happens is that you may be incrementing them or decrementing them more than required. You may be incrementing this parameter or decrementing this parameter more than required. So as you can see in this figure, so this is what it is happening, right? It is incrementing more than required. It is incrementing more than required and realizing, oh no, I have incremented it more than required. Okay, I have to decrement it now. Then decrementing it more than required and realizing that I have to increment it now. Incrementing, decrementing, incrementing, decrementing, incrementing, decrementing. Finally, the path to reach to this optimal point is zigzag. So which path do you prefer? If this A is the source and B is the destination, you want to reach here. So do you prefer this path Or do you prefer this path? Path 2 or path 1? Zigzag path or straight path? We prefer the straight path because it converges fast, isn't it? We prefer the straight path, isn't it? Whereas if there is a huge range difference between the features, your path to reach to this objective is this zigzag. So therefore, it takes a longer time to converge. So that is the reason why we have to bring them into the similar scale. So when we bring them to the similar scale, you will see it like a concentric circles as we have seen in the previous slide. And your path to reach to this is not this much zigzag. It may be like this, small zigzag, or almost like a straight line. Okay, so the gradient descent algorithm converges more quickly, right? So that's the reason why we have to bring these features into the similar scale. So these are some of the popular feature scaling method: max-min scaling, mean normalization scaling, z-score scaling. All these are the different normalization or feature scaling techniques. So the second thing that we need to take care of when we are practically implementing this gradient descent algorithm is the learning rate alpha, or the step size also we call it as a step size also. So which step size that we have to select? So what should be the step size? We have to select the correct step size, otherwise there will be a problem. Now the question is how to choose this alpha, how to choose the step size, how to choose the learning rate. So you plot this j of theta versus the number of iterations. It means how the j value is varying over the number of iterations. If you see curve something like this, which is monotonically decreasing, then it means the gradient descent algorithm is working. What is our objective? Our objective is to minimize this. If it is decreasing monotonically, it means our gradient descent algorithm is working. It means that's okay. The current step size is good enough, right, to achieve our objective. What if it is not decreasing? If it is increasing, probably we have to adjust this alpha value. Am I right? Probably you have to adjust this alpha value and choose the smaller size for this alpha value, right? So I'll tell you one story so that it will be more clear to you. So imagine that you have a house. You have got a house, beautiful house, which is in between the two hills in a valley point. Okay, so you've got two hills like this, and in between that there is a valley point here, and you've got a house here. Right. So imagine you're somewhere here and you want to reach your home. Imagine you are somewhere here and you want to reach your home. You want to reach your home. Okay. So imagine you are a very big Rakshasa like Kumbhakarna. You have got very big step. Okay. Longer foot you've got. Very big step you have got. It means one step you are taking from here, you're going to the other hill. Another step you are taking from here to back, you're going here. You're going here. You're going here, you're going here, going here, going here, going here, going here. Will you be able to reach your home? Will you be able to reach your home? No, right? You'll be moving front and back between the hills, right? But you'll never be able to reach your home, or it may take a very longer time otherwise, right? You may be taking this front and back, front and back, front and back, front and back. Finally, you'll be reaching your home, right? So it takes a very longer time to converge, or in some cases, you may not converge at all also. What if, imagine you're a small ant, you've got very small foot, teeny steps, ton. So will you be able to reach your home? If you've got very small steps, teeny steps, will you be able to reach your home with the small steps?
Yes, sir.
Will be able to reach your home, but it takes a very longer time to go. Am I right? Isn't it? So choosing a correct value of for alpha, correct step length is very much important. So in both the cases, if you take less step size or bigger step size, it takes a very longer time to converge. And if you take bigger step size, sometimes it may not converge also, right? So that is the reason why you have to adjust this alpha to the smaller values and you realize that it is increasing. So because You may be crossing it. That is why it is increasing, right? That is why you have to adjust this alpha to the smaller values, right? And there are different ways of selecting this alpha. One of the ways that try it with different values for alpha and see which is performing more better on a validation data set and fix it to that value. It's like a hyperparameter tuning. This is one possibility. The second possibility is that you have got line search algorithms. They dynamically adjust this alpha values. Line search algorithms, they dynamically adjust this alpha values. Initially, they take a bigger alpha. As it moving towards the optimal point, it reduces them to the smaller and smaller values. So this is another way we call them as a line search algorithms, right? So this is another aspect that we need to remember when you are implementing this gradient descent algorithm practically. So now let us see the vector notation, vectorized implementation. The advantage I have seen, to take the advantage of parallelism, we go for the vectorized implementation. And for the vectorized implementation, vectorized representation of the problem is very much important. Now I'm just taking x as this by adding column of 1s to represent x naught. X naught equal to 1 we said, right? Column of x naught. And this is the rest of the thing is taken from here. So this is x, right? So it's a matrix of all the feature vectors. It's a matrix of all the feature vector. Each row represent one feature vector. And this is the target value vector, which is y. So this is y and this is x. So given x and y, my goal is to learn a theta such that y equivalent to x times theta. So right. So theta equivalent to theta naught, theta 1, so on, theta n, and h theta of x equivalent to x naught, theta naught plus x1, theta 1, so on, xn, theta n. So which you can write it as a x times theta, x times theta. So when you multiply x with theta, what will you get? What is the resultant matrix size? If x size is m by n plus 1 and theta size is n plus 1 by 1, what would be the resultant matrix size? The resultant matrix size is m by 1, isn't it? Which is a prediction matrix h theta of x. So this is the prediction matrix. This is the actual matrix. Both of size m by 1. So this is the vector of all the actual values, actual target variable, and this is the vector of all the predicted values. Our goal is to minimize the difference between them. So it means we want to minimize the squared error. What is the squared error? X theta minus y is the error. So if I say this is the error, E square is, so let me say, so you've got two matrices, y, which is actually equivalent to y1, y2, so on, ym. So on, ym. You've got a prediction matrix H now, which is equivalent to x times theta, and the resultant is equivalent to this, H1, H2, so on, Hm. What is the error of one instance? Error I is equivalent to Hi minus Yi. Am I right?
Sir, can you please explain how we got this h theta x?
H equal to x times theta, madam. H equal
Sorry,
to
sir.
H equal to x times theta. H is representing as a prediction vector, which is equivalent to x times theta. So it means, how do I get x? H, a prediction. This is how I get the prediction, isn't it? I multiply that vector with this, a vector of theta values, isn't it? So I multiply this with this column, I get a prediction for this. I multiply this with this column, I get a prediction for this. This row with this column, I get a prediction for this, and so forth. It means I'm multiplying this matrix with this vector, I get a prediction vector which is of size m by 1 at a time. Am I right, madam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is how I've got this H1 to Hm. All the predictions for all the individual M objects. And these are the actual values. And the error is, squared error is Hi minus Yi whole square. So if I take the error as Hi minus Yi, Hi minus Yi whole square is Ei square. Isn't it, madam? So
Yes,
If I
sir.
take y minus h, I get a vector of errors E1, E2, so on, En. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, something problem with the pen. It's moving. Okay, so please give me, I'll go back. Yeah, so y minus h will give me the vector of all the errors. So now if I want to get the square of these errors and sum over them, how do I get? If this is error E, if I represent this as error matrix, is it okay if I take E transpose times E? What do I get when I take E transpose times E? Somehow my pen is too slow today. Oh, probably I'm not connected to this internet. Give me a second. At Fabernet only. Okay. Anyhow. Yeah. So if E is equivalent to this a vector of all the errors, E1, E2, so on, M. What would I get if I take E transpose E? That's what my question. What would I get? I get E1 square plus E2 square plus so on plus EM square. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Right. So this is equivalent to sum over I equal to 1 to M EI. Correct? EI square, sorry. Sum over I equal to 1 to M EI square. And that is equivalent to the sum over I equal to 1 to M I equal to 1 to M H theta of xi minus yi whole square. Isn't it our objective? So I've just represented this in a vectorized notation. The sum over I equal to 1 to M H theta of xi minus yi whole square. So this is the error x theta minus y, which is the difference between actual and predicted values. So I'm just taking the transpose of that. So E times E transpose times E. So this is E. Is this clear? I'm just representing it in a vectorized notation. Is that clear?
Sir, I'm having a question actually.
Yeah,
So why we are taking this format E is equals to y minus h? Why we are doing this to find out the error y minus h?
Madam, that is the difference between actual and the predicted values.
Okay, that means the
Deviation between the prediction and the actual values we are taking as the error.
so this y is the predicted one, sir.
Y is the actual value.
Yeah, that the price which we got. Okay, and then from the multiplication of these two, we got the predicted value.
Predicted value. The difference is that deviation between them.
Now got it, sir.
Yeah. Right. Similarly, I can represent the updation rules also in a vectorized form. Right. So instead of writing it as a theta naught theta I equal to theta I minus derivative of j with respect to theta I can update the whole theta matrix at a time and using the vectorized notation. So this is equivalent to updating them using like this. It's in a vectorized notation. So this is just to take the advantage of the parallelism. I'm just representing in the vectorized notation so that the updation rules can happen in parallel. Okay, so the whole theta matrix is updated at a time like this. So you have a theta matrix which is all theta values, theta naught, theta 1, so on, theta n, equivalent to theta naught, theta 1, so on, theta n minus, this is like derivative of j with respect to theta naught, so on, derivative of j with respect to theta n. Okay, so alpha times here, right? So this is just like updating all the rules at a time, all the parameters at a shot. So that's all about the gradient descent algorithm and linear regression, univariate linear regression and multivariate linear regression, and solving the problem using the gradient descent algorithm. So is that clear so far? Are you with me? Any queries? Any queries? Many one. Is that clear? Are you with me so far? Anything that you have missed?
My question arising here is like, where do we face in this realistic scenario this gradient descent problem?
So gradient descent is like an optimization technique, madam. If you want to learn a particular parameters of your model, right? So we go for this optimization technique, especially when you cannot solve them using this closed form solution kind of things, right? So this forms the basis for learning, machine learning, right? Because it is learning something, right? What is it learning? It is learning the parameters of a model. Right. So for example, when I say this house price prediction example, I gave an example, right? If the input value is 100, the output is 300. The input value is 200, the output is 500. The input is 300, the output is 700. The input is 400, then the output is 900. And from this, you have analyzed the data and said that the relation is this. So this is the price, this is the size. So the price is equivalent to 2 times the size of the house plus 100. So this is what the relation that we found, isn't it? Wherein
Yes,
this
sir.
2 and 100 are depending on this data. Suppose if I have a different data set, this 2 and 100 will vary. You may get a different values for this. Instead of 2 and instead of 100, I may have a different values, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it? So this is learned automatically from this data, isn't it? So this we are representing as a parameter. So this is theta 1 and this is theta naught. We're representing them as a parameter and these are learned automatically from the data. Right. If the
Yes,
data
sir.
is progressing, your parameters you'll be updating because your learning is continuous. Right. And the relation is evolving as the data is increasing. As it gets the more experience, it is improving, isn't it? So that's how human also improving, right? I mean, human have the ability to learn from the experience, isn't it? And we say that we are learning something, and when our experience at some task is improving, isn't it? And our performance at some task, if it is improving, then only we say that we are learning something, isn't it? So I say that I'm learning dance. Suppose if I say I'm learning dance, when can I say that I'm learning dance? If my performance over dance is improving over a period of time, then only I can claim that I'm learning dance. Am I right? Suppose you say that you're learning cooking. If when can you say that? If your performance at cooking is improving over a period of time, then only you can claim that you're learning cooking. Am I right? So the performance is improving over a task. That is learning. If you can program the machine to do the same thing, then it is machine learning. Right? So if the machine can improve over some tasks, at some tasks, with its experience, then you say that machine learning. Machine is learn. Is it? So what is the task here? The task is to predict this house price accurately, right? So with these instances, it may be giving some performance. As the number of instances is increasing, it means its experience is improving. So the number of instances that it is observing, the number of examples that it is observing, it is improving. It means the number of real-time data sets, the data points that it is collecting is improving, increasing. It means its performance, its experience is also improving. It means its performance should improve at this task. So it means it is continuously learning and updating these parameters theta naught and theta 1 so that its performance will improve over a period of time with respect to the experience. Right. So that is where the gradient descent algorithm help us to learn the optimal parameters that minimizes the difference between actual and the estimated prices in this particular case. So in general, it is helping us to minimize the objective function. Is that
That means,
clear
sir, to
now?
get more accuracy, basically.
To minimize the difference between actual and predicted over the training instances. Whether we get accuracy or not, good accuracy over the test instances or not, it's a different thing. But we feel that if it is accurate over the training instances, for the test instances also it will be accurate. For future
Got it,
instances
sir.
also it will be accurate. Yes.
Got it, sir.
I hope that's clear.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now the situation is clear. I mean, the picture is clear.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Any other query? So that you have not understood so far, so that I can clear you. Is the learning process clear? Learning process? Active
Some
participants?
students,
Yeah.
some students are here of MTech also. So please, can you been stuck in any of the point? You can ask to sir. Okay, it seems, sir, that things have been clear. We can go ahead.
Okay, right. So now we're going to see another form of solution, which is a closed form solution, right? So I've told you that initially itself, there is another way of solving it using linear algebraic equations. So let me explain you that how to solve using the linear algebraic equations and in what cases we can go for the closed form solution and what forms you can, and in what situation you can go for the gradient descent algorithm, right? We'll see that. So now we have given x and y, where x is the all feature vectors, matrix of all the feature vectors, y is the corresponding target variables, right? These two are given to us. Our aim is to find theta such that y is equivalent to x times theta. So that's what we have seen here also, isn't it? So we have given, x, we have given y. We have to find theta such that y equal to x theta. The prediction is equivalent to the actual value, isn't it? So that's what our goal is. So if y equivalent to x theta, suppose if we want this, right? So can I multiply x inverse both the sides? I multiply x inverse both the sides. I get x inverse y is equivalent to x inverse times x times theta. X inverse times x times theta. So what is A inverse times A? Can anyone tell me what is A inverse times A? So this is equivalent to some identity matrix. Am I right? A inverse times A is equivalent to I, right? Yeah, I, right, which is an identity matrix. So this is equivalent to identity matrix times theta, right? So anything multiplied by identity matrix, I multiplied by A, which is equivalent to what? Which is equivalent to A. So anything multiplied by identity matrix is equivalent to that matrix. So I times A is equivalent to A. So from this, can I write this, which is equivalent to theta? Because if you multiply I with any matrix, that is equivalent to that matrix, theta, right? So now theta is equivalent to x inverse y. So that's what we are interested to find, right? We know what is x, what is y. But here it is saying, if I multiply x inverse y, I get theta. But what is the problem here? The problem here is that x may not be an inversible matrix all the time. X may not be a inversible matrix all the time because it may not be a squared matrix all the time. May not be a squared matrix all the time, right? So the n may not be equivalent to m. If this x size is of size n m by n, m may not be equivalent to n, right? So x is not an inversible matrix. So can I do something so that this inverse can be computed only for the square matrix? So let us see, right? So using this formula, I times A is equivalent to A, right? So I can write A equivalent to I times A. So using that formula, I'm just writing y as a I times y. Can I write y as a I times y? Your response is required. Can I write? Yes, I can write. Okay. So using this formula, A inverse times A is equivalent to I. Means I equivalent to A inverse times A. Right. So I'm writing this. This is X inverse. Instead of taking I, I'm just taking X transpose inverse times X transpose. X transpose inverse times X transpose. Right, I'm writing this. Can I write this? Because A inverse times A is equivalent to I. So instead of I, I'm writing X transpose inverse times X transpose. Right, I can write that, right? Can I write instead of I? Yes. Now, you tell me, what is this? B inverse times A inverse. B inverse times A inverse is equivalent to AB whole inverse. You remember this formula? B inverse times A inverse equivalent to AB whole inverse. So now you can substitute that here. Two inverses are there continuously. Using that formula, I can write it as X transpose X whole inverse equivalent to X inverse times X transpose inverse. Right. So theta equivalent to X transpose X whole inverse times X transpose Y is it. Now tell me, X transpose X, is it a square matrix or is it a rectangular matrix? X transpose X, is it a square matrix or is it a rectangular matrix? X transpose X is always a square matrix, isn't it? So it is an inversible matrix. So this we call it as a pseudo inverse. So we can just get the theta value by substituting X and Y values in this equation. Now the question, ask me question. Why should I ask questions to myself? Ask me question. What is the question running your mind? If I can get theta value using the simple equation in a snap of time just like this, why do I go for gradient descent algorithm? Take all that headache of fixing alpha, learning theta values, iterating it over number of iterations, and finally arriving at the optimal value. Did you get this question or not? Did you get this question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So if we can solve this theta using a simple equation, why do I go for the gradient descent algorithm? I'll make my life easy by just substituting them in this equation. There is some problem with this equation. The problem is the inverse operation required by this equation. So what is the complexity of the inverse operation? The complexity of the inverse operation is order of n cube. Okay, so that is okay when n value is small like 1000 or 10,000. What if the n value is 1 lakh? What if the n value is 1 crore? Very big number.
Yes.
An order of n cube is too much, isn't it? Isn't it? It takes a very longer time to converge, isn't it? For a longer value of, for a bigger input sizes, isn't it? So the only problem is the time. Okay. Whereas the gradient descent algorithm converges much faster as compared to this. So when n is low, you can think of normal equations as a better option. However, for the greater values of n, gradient descent algorithm works much faster as compared to this linear algebraic equations. So the closed form solution works better when the input size is smaller and no need to choose alpha, no need to iterate, nothing. Right. But when value is big, it takes a very longer time to converge. So we have to go for some optimization technique to learn for this theta values. So that's the reason why we have two different things, right? So we have discussed the gradient descent algorithm, one of the optimization technique, isn't it? So we also call it as a batch gradient descent algorithm. We also call it as a batch gradient descent algorithm. We also call it as batch gradient descent algorithm. There are other optimization techniques like stochastic gradient descent, mini batch gradient descent. We will discuss them also in this slide. Right. So if you see the gradient descent algorithm, to update for a single parameter, you're considering all the instances. So if you observe, this is what the equation that we have got in the gradient descent line. theta j equivalent to theta j minus alpha times derivative of j with respect to theta j, right? So when you are considering this j value, you are considering the j value with respect to each and every instance, somehow equal to 1 to m. It means to update for a single parameter, you are computing the gradient with respect to each and every example, with respect to each and every instance, and taking the average over there. So that's what the gradient descent algorithm is. Whereas in the case of stochastic gradient descent algorithm, only one example at a time, right? At a time, we consider only one example and we repeat it over all the examples. So we don't take all the examples at a time and take the average here. We just take one example at a time and then we repeat it over all the instances for I equal to 1 to. So this is stochastic gradient descent.
So why, sir, we call it stochastic?
Why the
Might be
name? Why the
it's the
name has?
name. Yeah,
I
like
have never thought of it actually, but why the name came like
I,
that? Stochastic.
might be
Yeah.
related with some AI term, sir. Stochastic.
Yes, yes.
Like
Stochastic means I think it's step by step. The meaning is like
okay. Hmm. Got it.
precisely prediction or something like that. The meaning is something like that because here
Step by step.
step by step we are doing this. Precisely we are updating them. That is the reason probably that they have given the word stochastic. I've never thought of this where the name came. Yeah, but probably that could be the reason.
Yeah, actually, because
Yeah.
stochastic is like the term which is very highlighting actually. Because like as you told that it is doing the whole batch it is doing for gradient descent. But since we are doing for the individual iteration,
Yeah.
yes, sir, got it.
Yeah. So this is one thing. So if you see the gradient descent or a batch gradient descent, which is considering all the examples, and stochastic gradient descent only considering one instance at a time and repeating it over all the instances. The mini batch gradient descent is in between these two. So it will not consider all the instances. It will not consider only one instance. So it is in between the both the extremes. Instead, what it will do is that it will divide the examples into mini batches. For example, let's say you have 100 instances, it may divide it into 10 batches or 20 batches. And to compute the gradient, it will do with respect to one mini batch at a time and it repeat it over all the batches, right? So if you have 10 instances in a mini batch, it will compute the gradient with respect to this 10 instances and it repeat it over 10 batches. So that is the mini batch gradient descent algorithm. The different ways of updating them, right? So batch, stochastic, and mini batch gradient descent, right? So the probabilistic interpretation, you require some probability knowledge for this. So keeping the complexity of this in mind, and because I have not dealt with probability concept in any of the previous sessions, I'm choosing to skip a few slides, probabilistic interpretation of this. So there is some theoretical background that why we have taken a squared loss. So this probabilistic interpretation explains that. So I think it's better than better to skip rather than confusing you and making you feel unconfident about this. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. So please, any query so far in linear regression, you may ask. Then we will move to the polynomial regression. Any query so far? Right. So shall we proceed to the polynomial regression?
So, sir, my question here is like in whatever the research problems we deal with, we need to go for discussing the gradient descent. Is it necessary to go for? I mean, because this is really required to do the difference between the predicted and the actual one. So ultimately, one has to show
Madam,
the
yeah, if you are employing the existing algorithm, like linear regression or something, these gradients are known to everyone, right? So you need not discuss them in your paper, though you are using them internally. But if you are proposing your own objective function, here we have used squared laws, right? Instead of that, for your problem, let's say that depending on the theoretical background, depending on the assumptions that you have made, based on various things, your objective may change. So though it is objective is to minimize the deviation between actual and predicted, it may not be a squared loss all the time. It can be a 0-1 loss, it can be a negative log likelihood loss, it can be a cross entropy loss. Like that, different function, different objectives are there, different loss functions are there, and objective is to minimize these loss functions. Suppose if you are coming up with a different loss function, I mean different problem in a different setting, okay, then definitely you need to give these gradients. Okay, so these are the gradients that we have derived, and this can be vectorized also. So like that we give. Like for example, we have solved for the matrix factorization problems, wherein now we have proposed altogether a different objective because we have changed our matrix factorization technique. We proposed a new matrix factorization, which is solving for the different objective function. So there we have derived and given a complete gradients also and vectorization of them. It is like that. If you're going for a new objective function and you're proposing that, then you have to derive them and see that whether they can be vectorized or not, and what are the advantages, disadvantages, all that you need to consider and give them. Yeah.
Got it, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other query? Right. So if you see the linear regression, what was the assumption? Assumption is that there exists a linear relationship between the output variable and the input variables. So this is what we assumed. It means the output is a linear combination of the input variables. It means you can fit a straight line to the data. So the data is looking more or like a straight line or a hyperplane. They are on one line, I mean, or on one hyperplane. So that's what the assumption of the linear regression. That assumption may not be true always, isn't it? So the data may be in different shapes, not necessarily like a straight line, isn't it? It means what? The relation may not be a linear relation all the time. The relation can be a non-linear relation also. Like you see the data earlier, we have observed that the second order polynomial is fitting better than the first order polynomial, isn't it? It means what? The data, the relation between this output variable and the input variables is non-linear in nature, isn't it? So that's what the assumption of the polynomial regression. So it assumes that the relation is non-linear in nature. Here we see the choice of features, how the different choice of features lead to the different hypotheses, and we'll see the polynomial regression. We'll see the problem with the polynomial regression, overfitting problem. Then we'll see how to solve this overfitting problem using regularization and how different regularization term will lead to the different regression solutions. Lasso regression, ridge regression, and elastic net regression. So this is what we're going to see. So how to get different learning algorithm by choosing the appropriate features. So let's take an example to give you a clarity about this point. Suppose take the two features. Let's take house price prediction. Let's say that these two are the features given to us. Two features are frontage and depth. Frontage is giving width of the plot alongside the road, and depth is depth away from the road. So these two are the features given to us. So we need not restrict ourselves to these two features. So we can create new features using these two features. We can create new features by using these two features. Like for example, I can create an area of the plot by multiplying frontage and depth. Okay, or I can give more weightage to the frontage and depth less weightage, and then I consider that as one of the feature. So like this, I can create multiple features from these two features. I can use these new features instead of using the world features or along with the world features. Like for example, in this, I can use just the area instead of using the frontage and depth. And area is a better indicator to know the plot cost, right? So theta naught plus theta 1 x3 I can use instead of using x1 and x2, where x1 x2 are the frontage and depth respectively. And often by creating these new features, you may get a better model. So now if you see this, so okay, let me go to the next slide, then I'll explain you. Right, so you can create a new features. That's what the summary of the slide. Right, for example, if you take the previous example of the size and price. So if you go for the linear regression problem, it may fit a line like this, right, straight line. So if you go for the second order polynomial, your model is like this. The straight lines model is this theta naught plus theta 1x. Right, the curves model is this theta naught plus theta 1x plus theta 2x squared, second order polynomial. If you go for the third order polynomial, it may look something like this, theta naught plus theta 1x plus so on plus theta 3x cube, which is this. Right, so in this particular case, theta 3 cubic function is a better model than the other two, isn't it? So if you see, you will definitely say that this cubic function is better than this straight line, isn't it? Which is fitting better to the data, cubic function or the straight line? Which is the better representative of the data? Cubic, right? So I said squared loss is cubic is better than the squared loss in this particular case, because if you see this squared, sorry, not squared loss, it's a second order polynomial. Second order polynomial is better than the cubic function, because if you see the cubic function, after some point of time, as the size of the data is increasing, size of the house is increasing, the price is decreasing. So that's the reason why I said the cubic is better than this square, right? So because it is increasing as the size of the house is increasing. Now if you see, what is this x square and x cube? X square and x cube are the features that you are generating, isn't it? So you have given x, which is the size of the house. You're creating new features. You're creating new features like x square and x cube. So now if I say this is my feature 1, which is x1, if this is my feature 2, x2, and this is my feature 3, which is x3. So what is this model? This model will become theta naught plus theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2 plus theta 3 x3. Am I right? So how is this model looking like? Isn't it a linear regression model? Isn't it a linear? Yeah, it's a linear regression model, isn't it? It means what? You're just creating the additional features and applying linear regression model on this. So in other words, you're transforming the problem from a original space to a space where there exists a linear relationship between the output variable and the input variables, right? We are transforming the problem. The original problem we are taking and the original space we are taking, and we are converting that into a sum problem where there exists a linear relationship between the output and the input variables by adding the additional features. So we are transforming the problem to a new space where there exists a linear relationship between the output variable and the input variables. So that's all we are doing. We are just creating the additional features, polynomial features, and transforming the problem to a new space and applying linear regression there. So that's all polynomial regression. So instead of choosing for the conventional polynomial features like x square, x cube, you can also go for square root of x, cubic root of x, fourth root of x, and so forth. Right. So lots of features, the dimensional reduction techniques or feature selection techniques will help you to how to select the important features. Right. So now with one input variable, we have seen x square and x cube. Right. What if I have two input variables, x1 and x2? What if I go for the second order polynomial? What are the features that I need to generate? I'll have to generate x1 square. I'll have to generate x2 square. I'll also have to generate x1 times x2. Similarly, if I go for the third order polynomial, I'll have to generate x1 cube, x2 cube, x1 square, x2, x1, x2 square, and so forth. Right. If you have 3 features, you will have to go for x3 cube, x1 cube, x2, so on like that, right? All the possible third degree polynomials you will have to generate. That's right. So the hypothesis is this. Hypothesis of a polynomial regression is this. What is the hypothesis in linear regression? The hypothesis is theta naught plus theta 1 x in the case of linear regression model. The hypothesis in a polynomial regression model is this: theta naught plus theta 1 x, theta 2 x squared, so on, theta n x to the power m. So here m determines the model and theta determines the parameter. M determines the model, theta is the parameter of the model. So what m should be chosen is determined by the model selection. Given m, what theta should be chosen is determined by the parameter selection. So to explain what value that we should choose for m, what should be the value of m. So I've taken one example here, as you can see in the figure. So this is an example that I have taken synthetic data set. I have generated the data synthetically. I've generated x in the range of 0 to 1 randomly, x in the range of 0 to 1, and to get y. So this is input variable randomly generated in the range of 0 to 1. And what is the output variable? Output variable is sine 2 pi x. So I've given it to some function, sine 2 pi x, some model, and added some random noise to it. And I've got these points. So this green curve is sine 2 pi x. The green curve representing the sine 2 pi x. And it's like a sine curve, isn't it? So it's a sine 2 pi x, and added some random noise to it so that I've got these points. So you randomly select x, give it to sine 2 pi x, and add some little bit noise so that you will get points around this curve. So it means this green curve is the model, underlying model from which I have generated this data points. The green curve is the underlying model from which I have generated this data points. Now, given this data points, I have to learn a model. Given these data points, I have to learn a model. So when I'm learning model, I should be able to learn a model close to the underlying model. Am I right? I should be able to learn a model which is close to the underlying model, isn't it? So because the underlying model represents the data well, right? So let us see let us try different values for m and see which is close to the underlying model, right? So let me take m equal to 0. So what is hypothesis when m equal to 0? Can anyone tell me what would be the hypothesis when m equal to 0? When h theta of x, when m equal to 0, what is h theta of x? Substitute m equal to 0. What would be the hypothesis? It's just theta naught, isn't it? When m equal to 0, it is just theta naught, isn't it? Am I right? Right, it's just theta naught, right? So this means it is independent of the input variables and it is axis parallel line. Tell me now, when m equal to 1, what would be the hypothesis?
Theta naught plus theta 1x.
Theta naught plus theta 1x, which is equivalent to linear regression model. When m equal to 2, this is equivalent to theta naught, theta 1x,
Theta 2x square.
theta 2x square, second order polynomial, and so forth. So let us try different values and see. So when m equal to 0, and this is the cost function that we want to minimize, squared loss here also, I'm ignoring that. So yeah, so 0th order polynomial. It means as theta of x equivalent to 0, theta naught, means I'm getting an axis parallel line like this, right? Means I'm not giving any importance to any of the features. It means I'm taking theta 1 to theta n as zeros, right? So I just get the axis parallel line. Do you think it is representing the underlying model? So this is the line that I've got. It's a prediction, and this is the actual underlying model. Do you think it is fitting to the data well? Is it
No, no.
representing the data well? No, right? It's not at all close to the underlying model, or it's not representing the trend of the data given to us, right? So let me increase m value. M equal to 1, which is equivalent to the linear regression model, right? Theta naught plus theta 1 x. Is it better than the previous?
Yes.
It's little better than the previous, right? Do you think it is capturing the trend of the data or the pattern of the data? Is it fitting to the data well? Or is it representing the underlying model well? No, right? It's not at close to the underlying model. So let me go increase the number m value. Let me take the third order polynomial. So when I get the third order polynomial, it means the cubic function theta naught plus theta 1x plus theta 2x square plus theta 3x power 3. So this is the hypothesis. Is it better than the previous two models? Much better, right? So is it close to the underlying model? Is it close to the underlying model? It is close to the underlying model, right? Though it is not perfectly close, it is to the maximum extent it is closer. It is much closer. And as compared to the previous two, it is much better. It means when I increase the degree of the polynomial, my model's complexity is increasing and it is getting better, right? So let me try. Let me try m equal to 9, ninth order polynomial. Theta naught plus theta 1x so on theta 9x to the power 9. Right. So when I go for the ninth order polynomial, this is what I've got. Wow. It is going through each and every data point. See, have a look at that. It means each and every data point predicted absolutely perfectly. Training error is 0. Perfectly predicted. But do you think it is close to the underlying model? Do you think it is close to the underlying model? Given a new instance, will it be able to predict it correctly? Given a new instance which came from the same distribution. So let's say that I've generated another data point using the underlying model again. Like let's say that this is the point that I've generated which is close to this green curve. So do you think it is predicting this correctly? So the actual value is this, predicted value is this. There is a lot of deviation as per the as you consent the new instances. So what it is means it is performing very well on the training data and it is performing very poorly on the test data because it is not capturing the trend of the data or the underlying model well, isn't it? So this situation we call it as a overfitting. What is overfitting? Overfitting is the situation where the model performs very well on the training data and very poorly on the tested data, right? Other new instances. So this situation, we call it as a overfitting problem, right? Overfitting problem. And what is underfitting problem? Underfitting is a problem where the model fails on both training and testing data. This is a case of underfitting where there is a high bias. There is a high bias, high deviation between the test and training, between the actual and the predicted values. There is high bias here, and which is the example of the underfitting. Right. Whereas if you see this, it is perfectly predicting the training data, but given a test data, it will fail because it is not close to the underlying model. It is not representing the underlying model, right? Trend of the data, right? So this is the situation where it performs very well on the training data, very poorly on the test data. So this situation, we call it as a overfitting. And this is also having a high variance. As you see that in the process of fitting exactly to this data points, it is oscillating too much in between the data points. It is oscillating too much in between the data points. And this oscillation inducing lot of variance into the model. And this variance is leading to the overfitting problem. So that's the cause. In the process of fitting exactly to this training data points, this is oscillating too much in between the data points. And this oscillation causing this variance problem, right? The lot of variance is induced into the model. Because of that variance in the model, it is overfitting to this data, right? So that's the problem. So what is the solution? Have you understood what is the overfitting problem? Understood?
Yes.
What is overfitting? Yeah. So if you see the different values of m, with respect error and the different values of m, when m equal to 0, we've got both training and testing error high. So this is underfitting case. As you increase the m value, the training and testing error reduce it till certain point. And here if you see, the training error is 0, the testing error is very high. So this is a overfitting case. So this is underfitting, this is overfitting. right? So one of the solution to elevate the overfitting problem is increasing the size of the data set. One of the solution to elevate the overfitting problem is to increase the size of the data set. So the same ninth order polynomial, I have not changed anything except for adding 5 more data points. Earlier I have 10 data points, now I have increased it to 15. Right, I just added 5 more data points. 5 more data points. So now the model variance is reduced, isn't it? It's not that variance as compared to the previous model. Am I right? Variance
Yes,
is
sir.
reduced, right? So variance is reduced. Let me increase the number of data points more. So let me make m equal to 100. M equal to 100 data points are taken. You see, it's perfect, almost close to the underlying model, isn't it? So increasing the size of the data set alleviates the overfitting problem. Okay, not changed anything. Same ninth order polynomial. I just added some more points. Instead of 10 points, I've added 100 points now. So now the problem is solved, right? So that variance is not there now, right? So it is close to the underlying model, almost close to the underlying model. So one of the solution to elevate this overfitting problem is this, right? Increasing the size of the data set. But increasing the size of the data set, is it in our hand all the time? Is it in our hand? Can you increase the size of the data set for any data set? We can't do that, right? Unless we know the underlying model, isn't it? Here we know what is the underlying model. If not 100, you can generate 1 crore data points because you know what is the underlying model. Underlying model is sine 2 pi x. So you take x, you generate sine 2 pi x, and you generate as many number of x as you generate and give it to sine 2 pi x. Then you got the point, because we know the underlying model here. But if you take the real-time data sets, we don't know what is the underlying model. Am I right? We don't know what is the underlying model for the real-time data sets. So how can you generate a new points if you don't know the underlying model? So increasing the size of the data set is not in our hand all the time because we don't know what is the underlying model. So therefore, increasing the size of the data set can't be a solution in all the cases. Increasing the size of the data set can't be a solution all the time. So what should be the solution? There should be some generalized solution, which is nothing to do with the size of the data set, isn't it? Are you with me? Yes.
Yes, sir.
So there should be some solution which is generalized. So to propose some generalized solution, we must understand what is the root cause for this overfitting problem. So let us try to understand that. What is the root cause? So the root cause is this. So if I observe, when I observe this parameter values, this W0 to W9 or theta naught to theta 9 in our case, don't confuse, right? So when I see these parameter values, when I'm equal to 0, this is in a smaller range. When I'm equal to 1, this is also in a smaller range. When I'm equal to 3, relatively in the smaller range. But you see, when I'm equal to 9, this is in a very big range. And there is a huge range difference between the parameters. See, one is in minus 10 lakh, the other one is in plus 10 lakh. So there is a lot of deviation between the parameter values. So that is what is causing this curve to oscillate too much in between the data points because of this too much variance in the parameters. That is what is causing the variance in the model, right? So in your process of fitting exactly to the training data points, you're not keeping any control on these parameters. You're allowing them to grow as big as they can grow. We are allowing them to grow as big as they grow. So we don't have any control on them. As a result, there a lot of variance is induced into the parameters. So therefore, lot of variance is induced into the model. Because of that lot of variance in the model, overfitting problem has come. So what should be the solution? Can you propose a solution based on this? We have identified a root cause. What is making high variance in the model? So can you propose a solution now? What should be the solution? more points is not possible all the time, Jaya, madam or sir, I don't know. Yeah. So this is the root cause I'm explaining you, that we are not keeping any control on the parameters. That is the reason why a lot of variance is induced into the model. So what should be the solution? My answer itself as a question. Normalize, somebody said. Normalizing the parameters. And when you normalize, it may not be fitting exactly to the turning points. Is it okay if I keep some control on this parameter? Here, variance is induced because we are not keeping any control on these parameters. We are allowing them to grow as big as they can grow. So we should need some
We should
restriction.
take some. Wait, we should take some weights according to the parameters.
Yeah, we
Significance
should
of the
have some
parameters.
control on these parameters, madam. It means we shouldn't allow them to grow too big. It means we also want to minimize this in addition to minimizing the difference between actual and the predicted values. Right?
So we should assign some weights to these parameters.
Weights to these parameters itself is a weight, no madam, because this is a parameter is a weight that you are giving to a particular feature, isn't it? When you multiply this parameter with a corresponding feature, you get, I mean, you consider this as a weight.
Yes.
This itself is a weight, right? But if you have too much variance in these weights, that causes high variance into the model, right? To avoid that problem, what we do is that we will keep some control on these parameter values. Means we will not allow them to grow too big. We should have some control on this, right? So if we don't allow them to grow too big, what will happen? This much of differences will not come. This much of variance will not come, isn't it? So if I keep them in a smaller range, the variance will also be smaller, isn't it? So if I allow them to be in a very big range, then the variance will also be very high. Am I right, madam? So
Yes,
we
sir.
can restrict them to smaller range. How do I restrict them to a smaller range? I want to minimize them, isn't it? So in addition to minimizing the difference between actual and estimated prices, I also want to minimize the parameter values. I also want to minimize the parameter values. It means I want to penalize high weights that contribute to the high variance. I want to penalize high weights that contribute to high variance. That's what the regularization does then. Idea is to penalize high weights that contribute to high variance and sensitivity to the outliers. So earlier my objective is just this, minimizing the difference, the squared difference between predicted and actual values. Now I have got additional objective. Additional objective is to minimize this theta values also. And this lambda is some weight that you assign to this objective function. When lambda equal to 0, there is no regularization term. When lambda equal to high, you're giving more importance to minimizing theta values than minimizing the difference between actual and the estimated prices. So you have to choose the appropriate value for lambda. If you select a too less lambda, a too big lambda, both are problematic. I'll explain you that. Right. But is that part clear? The intuition and the proposed solution. That did you get the intuition behind the solution? Right. Yeah, penalizing high weights that contribute to high variance and sensitivity to the outliers. So there are here, if you see, there is a L norm associated here. So for different values of L, we have a different regularization terms. So when L equal to 1, we call it as a L1 norm. Here we take the absolute values of the theta values, absolute value of theta 1, absolute value of theta 2, plus so on, absolute value of theta n. So we just add this term to the objective function. So this, you can see it like this function, and the objective is to minimize this. It means you want to reach to this point according to this objective. Right. So earlier we know what is our objective, which is to minimize this, and according to this objective, we want to reach to this point earlier. Right. So this we know, we have already seen. Now we have an additional objective, and according to this, we have to reach here. So because these two are not the same objectives, there should be some trade-off between them. So we have to go for the intersecting point where these two objectives intersect, which means this point we are interested to learn now. So it means to some extent we are compromising on learning the optimal parameters and reaching here, but this ensures that overfitting problem will not be there. Any query here? All right.
Why we are this representing in this form lambda and this absolute value in this picturization manner? Why we are writing in this way, this thing?
This is to visualize how it looks like, madam. But if you see this function is like this, right? So you know this theta 1 square plus theta 2 square. If I write this, you will call it as a circle, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
The absolute value of theta 1 plus theta 2. That is like diamond. So this is the equation of this.
Okay.
Yeah, so and our objective is to go here, the minimum value of this this theta naught plus theta 1 or theta, whatever it is. So it is represented in a two-dimensional space, but in multi-dimensional space you can see it like a 3D and 4D view of that. I cannot draw that, no. So that is why I've just given in a two-dimensional. Similarly, this circle in a two-dimensional space, but if you go for the multi-dimensional, it can be visualized like a sphere.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So this is just a visualization I am providing, madam. So according to this, this is the visualization of this, and our objective is to go the minimum value of this, which is the center point of that. And this is, if I go for this, we have already seen. According to this, we want to go here, right? So both are not same. So we are finding the intersecting point when you trying to minimize both. Is that clear, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Similarly, if I go for L2 now, my objective is this square root of theta 1 square. I mean, my regularization term is this theta 1 square plus theta 2 square plus so on theta n square. So this is a kind of circle, right? So this is the point that you want to reach according to this objective, and this is the point that you want to go according to this, and the intersecting point that we are interested to learn. Right. Similarly, I can combine both L1 and L2 now with appropriate weights lambda 1 and lambda 2, and this gives me a elastic net regression, which is in between this diamond and the circle. Depending on the how much weightage I give to this lambda 1 and lambda 2, it can be anywhere between this diamond to the circle. Right. So this is for different values of L. These are the different shapes. L equal to 4, L equal to 2 we have already seen, L equal to 1 we have already seen, L equal to 0 0.5, L equal to 0 0.1 and so forth. To generalize the regularization term, this is what. So when you have a P norm, you have sum over xi power P to the power 1 by P. So let us see the effect of this regularization term in our example. So I'm taking different values of lambda, log lambda equal to 0. It means lambda equal to e to the power 0. It means it is equivalent to 1. It means more weightage you are giving to the regularization term. It means you are more focusing on the minimizing theta values rather than focusing on minimizing the difference between actual and predicted values. As a result, what happens? Your theta values get close to 0 because you are more focusing on minimizing them rather than minimizing the difference between actual and estimated prices. So this is leading to the underfitting problem, where you have got a model almost close to the axis parallel line, which means what? In the process of minimizing the theta values, all the values are theta 1 to theta n getting close to 0, almost close to 0. So you have left with h theta of x equivalent to theta naught, which is axis parallel line, almost like axis parallel line. Therefore, it is underfitting to the model. This is when log lambda equal to 0. It means you are giving very much high importance to the regularization term. So this is log lambda equal to minus 18. Same ninth order polynomial, same 10 points. You have not increased the size of the data set also. It means lambda equivalent to 2.71 to the power minus 18. E power minus 18, E value is 2.71, power minus 18. So some weightage you are giving, not too much less, too much high, right? So you see that. Now you've got a model which is close to the underlying model. So even though you are working with only 10 examples, even though you're working with only 10 examples, there is no variance in the model. So please observe that. So this regularization is reducing this overfitting problem. So let's check. So when log lambda equal to 0, you see that the parameter values are close to 0. So which is underfitting. And log lambda equal to minus infinity, it means lambda equivalent to e to the power minus infinity, which is 0. It means you're not considering the regularization term at all, which is leading to the overfitting problem. You see the parameter values in a higher range. When log lambda equal to minus 18, it means you're giving an appropriate weightage to this lambda or regularization term. So therefore, it is in a correct range and you're getting a correct model here, right? So the regularization alleviates the overfitting problem. So this is the proof. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is for the different values of lambda. You see, this is a overfitting problem where you give very less importance to this lambda value. This is an underfitting problem where you give more importance to the regularization term. So these are the textbooks. The first one, you can get all this content that I have demonstrated. So thank you very much. Happy learning. If you have any queries, I'll happily take.
Thank you very much, Dr. Venkatesh, sir. It was such a mind-blowing session. On behalf of all these participants who have been connected, I think that many things they learned new: linear regression, univariate analysis, multivariate, gradient descent problems, stochastic, mini batch, squared loss, cross entropy, different, I mean, matrix factorization, so many things you discussed, and it was so nice, sir, because you explained it very, at a lower levels, because we are actually, unfortunately, many students are here of MTech also, and some are doing a PhD, and might some have done PhD, but of the different areas. So you have done, I mean, you justified the topic with the basic levels. So it was too nice to grasp the knowledge from you. And going beyond this regression point, I mean, the polynomial regression, it found so much interesting to us that my research automatically focused towards in that now. I feel that it's very interesting, sir, and you have gave in a very simplistic aspect, and and you entertained the queries of ours, which might be some bothering to you also in between the session. If it is so, then I feel sorry for that, but the session was really very
I feel
interesting.
actually very happy when somebody asks questions. It means they are following it. Actually
Thank
feel
you,
very
sir.
happy. That's why I encourage questions. So
Yes,
thanks.
yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot to you also for making the session more interactive and interesting. And thanks a lot for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to interact with many people. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting our request.
Yeah.
Thank you once again.
Yeah. All right, ma'am. Have a nice day. Take care. Bye.
Same to you, sir. Thank you. So with this, we end our session of today. This is the last session of today, and we'll be starting from 9:30 tomorrow. And please check our ATAL schedule, which I already mailed to all the participants. And as far as I can see, the participant strength is somewhat low. So if any of this participant is having contact with others, this I kindly need to mention that we actually need to give the attendance sheet to the AICT, and then from finally the attendance sheet, the certificates have been issued by the ATAL people. So, and then there will be an, the query session, I mean, not the query, actually the quiz session at the last on 17th. So if we have not heard the sessions very carefully, then some problems can be there while attempting the quiz. So I kindly request the participants to be in all the sessions. And if you have got the contact with others, so please do convey to other people also. So with that, we end our session. Hope you all enjoyed and got, the good knowledges from the sessions which we had today. Thank you all.